Welcome to the Y Connect podcast. As the heartbeat of the community, the Y is a connector where people of all ages and walks of life come together to elevate their health, wellness, education, and essential life skills. Hear the stories of impact and join the authentic conversations where together we'll discover the journeys and pathways people take to connect through the Y. Now your hosts, Zarina, Robert, and Allison.
Robert, it's always good to see you. How are you?
It is always a pleasure. And I know it was only 2 days ago, but it's always a pleasure. No, I'm well. Last night, I had the privilege of escorting several of the participants of the REACH program, the partnership between Morehouse and the Y, under the umbrella of Boys of Young Men of Color. And so we were gifted tickets to the Hawks game. And so a whole lot of pictures taken and shaking hands and kissing babies last night.
I think we saw you guys. We got
on the jumbo screen and everything, and we're showing everybody the patch partnership. So it was a really, really great experience. And then many of the parents that escorted their children, their participants, they were asking me, when's the next program going to start? So,
yeah, they're ready. I love it.
They are absolutely ready.
Well, you can hear the laughter of our guest who was actually at the Hawks game last night. So we will talk about that.
Wow.
So let me do the honors of kind of teeing up what we're talking about today. So we're exploring the Y's global impact. I don't know if you know this, but the Y is located in 120 counties, and it serves over 64 million people worldwide. And one thing remains consistent across the world with Y's, that we share a commitment to improve the lives of people. And when we work together, the impact is exponential. One such example is our partnership with YMCA South Africa. We are honored today to welcome Marcus Van Wyk. He is the CEO of YMCA South Africa. Marcus has been in Atlanta visiting for a few days, as well as otherwise across the country. And I can tell you he is a dynamic leader. He has spent his career dedicated to social justice and youth development, and he brings a wealth of experience and insights that really resonate across borders. He joined the Y in 2022. Prior to that, he was Chief Operating Officer for Youth for Christ South Africa and served as project lead for the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And before that, he was a consultant to the South African Council of Churches, where he provided protocol and logistical support in 2013 for the state funeral of former President Nelson Mandela. Welcome. We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you for the opportunity, Robert. Appreciate it.
We truly are. We truly are excited about today. I want to begin with the first question, Marcus. We would love to start by hearing an overview of what your experience has been like since becoming CEO of the YMCA in South Africa in 2022.
No lies, only truth, right? It has been, when people ask me 2 years later, they say, how are you doing? I said, I'm smiling and I'm still here. So with the same amount of enthusiasm and excitement when I started, I still have that same enthusiasm and excitement. Despite the challenges, I think with YMCA South Africa, that has affected many Ys and many organizations around the world, how COVID has impacted, whether in terms of morale, mental health, the lack of resources, and then just dealing with the fact of how do we regain our posture and position in the work that we do. With myself specifically coming into the organization, coming from a compliance and governance background, helping in terms of organization development. It's been an interesting road, especially when you come into an organization where you don't have a history, and coming into an organization where you don't know the culture. And so I had to learn very quickly and say, how do I engage an organization? How do you lead an organization that you don't know well? But here's the interesting thing about organizations is they all work on the same principles. And so, but the difference is, and we've heard the saying before, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so you can put whatever new thing in place, but if the culture is not ready to own it, then there's no point in doing that. And so I've worked very hard around understanding the culture. Sometimes I'm like, what language is this white people speaking? But I think the last 2 years has been, I use the word interesting, it's been exciting. And also getting to know and understand the impact of the organization. And that is not just an organization based in South Africa, but it's part of a world organization that's been impacting young people and communities for over 100 years. And so that's exciting.
I want to ask you, as you've traveled globally and visited Ys across the world, and particularly here in the States, what would you say are some of the differences and some of the similarities between YMCA South Africa and other Ys?
I think one of the glaring differences is for me between Ys in the US and South Africa is you have a swim and gym model that effectively is reliant on your membership to fund what you need to do. In terms of our context in South Africa, we don't have the swim and gym model. We might have one or two Ys that have gyms, but that's not the main revenue driver. And in fact, most of our programs are geared towards youth development and community development based on the context in which they find themselves and the communities that they serve. In terms of the similarities, we serve the same mission and purpose. That is key. It's just that we do it differently. And I think just engaging some of the Ys across the US, I've encountered people who love what they do, and how they engage and where they encountered life-changing, I would say, experiences, whether it's as a camp, whether it's as a day camp, whether it's a swim event, whether it's just coming to gym. I've heard how people have been impacted by that. And so that is I would say, the similarity of impacting people's lives. It's just how methodologies differ.
That makes a ton of sense.
It really does. It really does. And just looking at, reflecting on what you were talking about on Tuesday during the fireside conversation, just talking about the different cultures within the different regions of the YMCAs within the different regions, I think definitely speaks to what you were just referring to. Outstanding.
And what Robert was speaking about, just really quickly, was we invited Marcus as a part of his trip here to sit down with our Y leaders from across the association that lead our Y facilities to do a fireside chat with our CEO, Lauren Kuntz. And it was wonderful. Sorry, the room was hot. Not sure what the deal was with the temperature and the thermostat, but the conversation was really robust. So Go ahead, Robert. I'm sorry.
The conversation actually kept everybody from not thinking about the temperature in the room. The YMCA of Metro Atlanta has been a member of the U.S. coalition to support YMCA South Africa since 2011. Can you share what the experience has been like working with the Y Association and other Ys from the U.S.?
I think one of the things that stands out for me and is the fact is that there's this typical scenario that those who come from the West are coming to tell us in Africa what to do and how to do things. The difference with this coalition partnership, it's a true partnership with this mutual benefit in that the U.S. coalition of YMCAs essentially have said that we are not here to tell you what to do. We are here to support in terms of strengthening your capacity to deliver the mission. And so that has been a constant refrain since the coalition partnership has started. And that's what I have experienced, in that there's a willingness to learn, there's a willingness to actually say, you know what, even if we want to say something, I think we should keep quiet. And especially from us from South Africa, we will tell you, please keep your views to yourself. But I think in the spirit of friendship and partnership, and the fact is that we're part of the same family, says to me that it's one of the longest standing coalition partnerships. It's going more than 15 years now. And so that is exciting for me. I can only speak of my experience over the last 2 years, but obviously those that have encountered the coalition in the past shares the similar views as well.
Thank you. I have to share that I have the honor and the privilege of going to South Africa in a couple of weeks to actually go on a coalition visit. I have, as one of our leaders took on the new CEO role of the Y of Detroit, Parrish Underwood. That was his role. He was really our liaison, our individual who's in charge of Y International Partnerships. Our CEO has asked me to take on that role. And so getting to know our Ys in different parts of the world that we partner with, this is that first step. So I'm humbled and really looking forward to it. And I promise I will I will just observe and enjoy the experience and certainly not tell anyone what to do. I would not have that role, and that would not be something I would feel comfortable doing anyway. So let's get back to what you were talking about at the beginning about the fact that the YMCA South Africa doesn't follow necessarily the same model that we do in the States around health and wellness and a gym facility culture. Rather, you've been focusing for many years on youth justice, student accommodations, actual hostels, wellness programs, training, and university partnerships. Could you perhaps share a specific story to help bring that work to life for us?
Sure, certainly. And so I'm going to try and think of one that kind of covers most of what we do. It's an interesting question when people ask, so what does the Y do in South Africa? I'm like, not one thing. We do many things. And so I'm going to try my best to focus on one specific one. So for instance, in the Western Cape, we have 6 YMCAs, and they all do different things. But the common theme is we work in impoverished communities. And so effectively, the Ys that have facilities in those communities they act as a safe space. So we have after-school programs where kids come after school, whether they participate in sporting programs, whether they participate in life skills. There's one specific program which has kind of been I would say, a catalyst and a leader in terms of the community development work in the Western Cape has been, we have one Y. In fact, we have 2 Ys. Separately, they both employ over 150 healthcare workers. Now, that's about 300 healthcare workers that actually work on the front line taking community healthcare to individuals, specifically around the HIV/AIDS pandemic in terms of the stigmatization. And so that's a program that has many partnerships in different communities spread throughout the Western Cape. And the feedback that we have been receiving is that, and it's not just the YMCA delivering the services, but it's people who are recognizing the partnerships that the Ys bring together. And I mean, the thing, and obviously for someone like yourself, Alison, dealing in the work of impact is, for us, what matters is how does one child's life get impacted, not necessarily an entire community, because we can only change a community at one person at a time. And so when we see, we don't necessarily do things at scale. Our programs are what we call, it goes deep rather than wide. And so you'll find that the programs we engage in are specifically aimed at ensuring that we have the maximum time with these kids or young people so that we can have an impact over a longer period.
I like that. It reminds me of a pastor here in the States, Andy Stanley, who has ascribed to the philosophy, small deposits make a lasting impact. The power of one. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Marcus, the COVID-19 pandemic had a very profound impact worldwide. How has the YMCA of South Africa adapted its programs and services to continue supporting communities during the challenging times?
Yeah, COVID is something that most people would want to forget. But we still feeling the effects 3 years later, in terms of us as a country. It's impacted our economy in a great deal. A lot of people lost their jobs, and of which the Y was part of feeling those effects. I just think of one specific YMCA or association in South Africa, in Soweto. They had to retrench 90% of their staff. And this was a Y who essentially generated the income from student accommodation and the services they sold. But they are still yet to recover from that. So that's how it has impacted. Some Ys are, I would say, at a very critical phase. Some are rebuilding. And then there are others that's doing well because of their healthcare program. They were the first responders. And in fact, the government actually depended on those programs that we had to provide services to people, or critical services needed at a community level when people couldn't leave their homes. So yes, it is still, so you'll still hear people say COVID has impacted us, but I think there's a level of resilience that I believe South Africans have despite the challenges that we are faced with. And that speaks to the spirit of how we got through the whole apartheid era of how do we move forward despite living under oppression. And so that same resilience is there. But what it has shown us, and it's not just for the YMCA, we actually need others. As organizations, we cannot live in a silo or in a bubble saying that we can do this on our own. We actually do need each other as we move forward.
Absolutely. And if I could just piggyback, we've adapted a philosophy or a practice here of one Y. So even though we have so many different association branches, we operate as one Y. Is that pretty much what you're referring to? Is that how you refer to?
So effectively, part of my team, what we've been working on is that similar concept of, in fact, when you look at a Y that's based in Athlone or Soweto, when people engage, they don't think of YMCA Soweto, YMCA Athlone. They see it as the YMCA, for good or bad. And we've adopted a saying that your Marines use. It's saying, leave no one behind. And so there's that camaraderie of saying, if the one is not doing well, all of us will make sure that one person or that one organization will do well. We're only as strong as our weakest.
I see, weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it.
You referenced apartheid. So I'd love to ask a question that really relates to the long history of your organization promoting social justice and equity. Can you share some initiatives or perhaps a strategy that YMCA South Africa is implementing to advance these principles, particularly in the context of your nation's history and the current social dynamics?
Thank you for the loaded question, Alison.
It's loaded. It is.
It is, as South Africa stands as, I would say, an example to the rest of the world in terms of how we've transitioned from the old regime to the new dispensation. And you note I use the word dispensation as opposed to regime. Is that we're 30 years into the democracy. People tend to forget 30 years is a very short time. And just because apartheid has been abolished as a system, as a political system, as an oppressive thing, it doesn't mean it has been removed from people's hearts or thinking or psyches. And so we are sitting with generations of trauma that we need to work through. As good as an example we are that we did not descend into civil war, we are still feeling the effects thereof. And so YMCA is one of those organizations that's also struggling with its history, also struggling with its, how do we move forward? I mentioned on Tuesday in the Fireside chat that we have 12 official languages. Again, what does that mean? Things get missed in translation. You know, one word can mean 10 different things. English is not everybody's first language. It's probably their third or fourth language. And so how we communicate is is quite intentional how we do that. For example, we have part of our youth justice program that is rolled out to most of our Ys across the country. It deals with issues around advocacy and human rights. And so we've been, I would say, successfully, specifically around the Durban area, we've been hosting what we call community dialogues or community indabas. And so you bring a diverse group of people together into a room, and we don't just do it alone. We invite the local municipality, the local police, politicians, community organizations, and young people lead the dialogues. The cool thing about those dialogues is people are able to communicate in their home language.
Okay. So
we're quite intentional about English not being the official language to speak with. You are free to speak in your language. And we're intentional about having interpreters in the room so that people can express themselves in their home language. And that's one of the ways in which we're trying to encourage the diversity of who we are as an organization.
That speaks to
when you speak about
belonging.
equity, that's yeah, absolutely. That's at its finest right there. Marcus, in your opinion, what are some of the most pressing issues facing young people in South Africa today? And for our listeners wanting to get involved, how might they help to address these issues?
So I'll start with this. We have what we call the triple threat in our country, and it's something the politicians use to maximize their voters and the constituency. But effectively, the triple threat is poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So you'd think that because we've got this new dispensation, that we're on this trajectory of growth. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of things that have gone well. The fact that I can be on this podcast, the fact that I can travel, the fact that I can go to a toilet where I'm not prevented to going to a toilet, the fact that multiracial relationships are happening, those things are all positives. But what has not happened is how do we translate that change where people see the benefit for their lives personally? And what doesn't help is we live in a system, a capitalistic system, that once again, the few benefit on the backs of those who work the hardest. And so poverty is rife in our country. Unemployment, just using an interesting statistic, is between 40 and 5% of people in South Africa are unemployed. That's a very high statistic. It's one of the highest unemployment statistics in the world. What even more shocking is that 60% of that statistic is young people. And so when we say the triple threat, those three things cannot be separated from each other: poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Inequality drives the poverty. Inequality drives unemployment. And so when you ask the question how people can get involved, I would say, first of all, before you get involved, understand the context of what the needs are. When people say, yes, what is it that you can do? I said, there's lots that you can do. However, you have to find something that resonates with where you can find what I would call the low-hanging fruit. Because those three things, you encounter somebody who lives in a shack or an informal settlement in Cape Town, where you have 10 to 15 people living in a small square shack, that they have to feed them, they have to go to school, they have to go to work. And you find majority of them are unemployed. How do you change the conditions of somebody like that? And so part of the work that we are doing as YMCA, and I'm not saying that YMCA is the only organization, we recognize that the threats or the crisis is too big for one organization to tackle. And that's why collaboration and partnership is so key. And so I would like to encourage those who are listening to the podcast and saying, how can we assist? Try and make a friend of somebody in South Africa. Listen to their story first and foremost. And once you listen to their story and you journey with them, you will know what it is that you need to do and where you can assist. And don't come in parachuting and saying, oh, we've got the solution. Because many times the solutions are in the communities already. All they need to know is that is somebody holding their hand.
Outstanding.
Very powerful what you're saying.
Outstanding.
And it's that empathy piece that you really speak to so well, Marcus. So looking to the future, as you know, you've said that this is really year 3 of your tenure so far. What are your hopes? What are your aspirations for the YMCA movement in South Africa? And how do you envision its growth?
I have very audacious, ambitious goals. And that is one, first of all, starting with the organization itself, is to be an organization that is stable, that has all its compliance and governance procedures in place, a strong board. We have systems in place that ensure that our local associations are able to thrive and flourish. To have an organization that, from a sustainability perspective, that it is able to not just survive, but able to thrive, that able to leverage its assets for the benefit of the communities they serve. And then to be part of a mass movement of organizations that put up their hands to say collaboratively that we are willing to, not on our watch will we allow a young person or communities to default back into where we come from. An organization such as the Y, that in terms of its posture, in terms of its status, that it uses the power of its brand to bring people together, both at a community level, but also from an advocacy perspective as well.
You do a lot of partnering. That's what I have really learned from you, that few days that you've been here, and I heard about you before you came, that is an intrinsic aspect of your leadership, that we can't do this alone. And that you've really developed more partnerships for the Y in South Africa.
Yeah. We can't do this alone, Alison. We'd be foolish to think that we can. And if you do think you can do it alone, you've got an ego problem. You're essentially just building your own kingdom.
Well put.
That's extremely powerful. Extremely powerful statement. Marcus, we normally wind down every episode by asking a question of how you were initially connected to the Y. We understand that your initial connection to the Y is through your hiring, as CEO. But we want to speak, we would ask that you speak of some examples of high-level impact that the YMCAs of South Africa have contributed to communities or to certain individuals. We oftentimes, hear stories of somebody growing up in the Y, learning how to swim in the Y, but this is a little different, and we truly want to hear your experiences of being in South Africa.
So, encountering the Y for me in South Africa, I've coined this phrase that everybody loves the Y, but they love it differently. And that's because each one had their own experience at a particular point in time. I remember, and I'll share a few stories shortly. A good friend of mine, she said to me, she's one of the foremost researchers around healthcare. And she said to me, Marcus, I hear you with the Y now. I want to share with you that in the 70s and the 80s, when we as activists were looking for a safe space, the Y was that for us. Even though it was a dangerous time, it was a safe space. There were those who often share that in the university years where they needed accommodation and they couldn't afford it, the Y was an interim space for them to do that. That was the experience. There are those who just, I'm thinking of our current treasurer on our national board. When he finished his high school career, he couldn't afford to study. And one of the local board members of association said, listen, we've got a program that you can join. And they provided a gap year of study for him at the Y. And was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and now he's the treasurer of the national board. And there are countless stories of how people's lives have been touched. And I think one of the most famous ones is that's not widely known. What I've discovered is a lot of people say that the Y is like the best kept secret. That during the 70s, at the height of apartheid, there was, I don't know if you've heard what we call our Youth Day, Soweto uprisings that happened in 1976 on the 16th of June. Are you familiar with that? And so on that day was the day that the world became aware of apartheid in its rawest form of violence and oppression. A few thousand high school kids decided that they were not going to be taught in the language of the oppressor, being Afrikaans. And they decided to organize themselves, high school kids. And guess what? It was Soweto YMCA that provided the space for these kids to organize what turned to be the most momentous day in the life of our country. These high school kids came to the Y, and the Y created a space for them to organize themselves. They organized this march in 3 days. Their parents didn't know, community leaders didn't know, nor did faith leaders or the police know what was going on. And so over 3 days, the Y provided a space for them to organize what today is known as Youth Day, and celebrated as Youth Day in the country, that essentially revealed the government for who they are. A few hundred young people actually lost their lives that day. As sad that it is, and I'm not saying that the Y was key to it, I'm saying that the Y played their role in providing a safe space.
Thank you for sharing that. The countless stories we hear about the Y having that presence in history and in prominent historical moments. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the variety of different experiences that you really illustrated and brought to life. So we would be remiss if we didn't also mention during your visit, we had the absolute pleasure of taking you to a Hawks game. And we're very grateful for this patch partnership that we've recently formed. And as a result of it, our YUSA international team members and our friends at YMCA South Africa are exploring what it would look like if the Atlanta Hawks got engaged in a partnership from a global perspective. And so last night was a great step in that direction. So tell us what you thought of the experience.
I thought it was great. My wife, Kevin, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I see great potential for the partnership. I see it as an extension of who the Hawks are and what they want to achieve to live up their vision and mission. And I think the partnership with YMCA Atlanta is the beginning of that. And as South Africans, is for those who want to know that, yes, there are many thousands of people who love basketball. You just got to see makeshift hoops and courts in our communities. But from a YMCA perspective in South Africa, we want to see how we can organize it in a structured way. I just got a message this morning, Alison, from our fireside chat. I remember that one of our local Ys, their main focus is basketball. And they've got 3 teams, under 14, under 16, and an open team. And one of the boys under 18 made the national basketball team. The announcement was made. And that came out of a small little Y, and this happened. And so what the partnership with the Atlanta Hawks and Metro Atlanta could do is we could see hundreds more across the country achieving something like that. And if we're able to do it without resources like this, can you imagine if the resources were there to do it?
Absolutely. extraordinary opportunities exist.
Absolutely.
We really look forward to exploring it further. Marcus, thank you so much. Thank you for visiting, first of all. I mean, I really enjoyed my time, and I think all of us did that had the opportunity to spend some time with you while you're here. And I can't wait to spend time with you in a couple of weeks.
There we go. And Robert, I look forward to time we can spend time together as well. Alison can't have all the fun.
Exactly.
I look forward to it as
well, we
sir.
need to have more trips. We do. And we need to get our youth back over. I think prior to the pandemic, we used to take groups of teens over periodically, and we need to start doing that again. So something to plan and look forward to. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Y Podcast. To continue the conversation or to find your closest Y, please connect with us at ymcaatlanta.org and sign up for our newsletter, Healthy Together.